Welcome. Today our story takes us back to 2002 in the Kandahar region of Afghanistan. It takes place from the perspective of an American Special Forces team sent out to investigate a missing platoon. The story is allegedly true by those who claim to be there, and I will leave links in the description for further reading I found interesting. But before we get started, if you are enjoying this video and want to see more, then please like, share and subscribe to my channel. It is deeply appreciated. This is the story of the Kandahar giant. At the opening of the 21st century, NATO and American troops were deployed to Afghanistan on Operation Enduring Freedom. The aim of the mission was to drive back the Taliban and defeat Al-Qaeda. After months of fighting, the enemy had been driven back into the mountains. Now an active war zone, the Kandahar Mountains were a perilous place to be. The mountain range was well known by the locals as a superstitious and paranormal place. But with NATO's heavy deployment in the area, there have been no reports of beasts or ghouls. At least, not yet. Whilst on patrol, a US Army unit goes missing. There was no radio transmission to signal any distress, and after failing to make contact at numerous checkpoints, HQ assumed the worst. It was at a time when the enemy would use crude methods to defeat NATO troops, and would use the natural cave formations to launch ambushes to alarming effect. There was a real fear to these mountains, and specifically to the caves, as disregarding the supernatural, a real enemy endured within. With nothing more they can do from within their bases, the US Army deploy their special forces to search for the missing patrol. It would be a hard and grueling task, as the lost patrol had left no clues in their wake and have given their would-be saviours nothing to go on. The outlook was bleak. Anything could have happened to them, and their missing patrol could be in any state, captured, wounded, or simply lost. They were truly walking into the unknown. The Special Forces, now landing close to one of the checkpoints the patrol had missed, begin their methodical and ruthless search. For 3 days and nights they strolled, always professional, but always on edge, knowing that at any moment they could be engaged from any of the high mountain ranges surrounding them. "Over here," said one of the troops. They spotted a large pass leading up to the mountains. It looked like a goat pass, but it was obvious numerous entities had scaled it in recent days. Travelling down the pass, they begin to notice skeletons and bones, and with Afghanistan being home to many large predators, they assumed they were advancing towards an animal's den. As the path narrowed, the bones began to look more familiar. They begin wondering if the bones were from animal or human. And as if answering their thoughts, they begin to see scraps of military clothing and smashed radio equipment strewn amongst the floor. The commander orders everyone to halt whilst he investigates. Still and silent, his soldiers hold their nerves, but he was unsure. The situation felt wrong. Reshuffling himself and holding his weapon tight, almost certain he had walked his men into an ambush, he cautiously continued the advance. He thought it almost certain these scraps belonged to the missing patrol, but what could have done this to so many men and left so little proof? Finally, after hours of ascent, unsure if each step would be their last, the pass began to enlarge. It opened into a small plateau with a large cave opening. Scanning the area, seeing nowhere else to advance, the commander orders his men inside. The mouth of the cave was covered with carcasses of man and beast. Entering, they soon reached a large drop-off, baffled at how anything could have made this cave their home. The drop was so large they could not see the bottom, and the commander felt it too risky to explore further. He orders his men into a defensive position as he reports his finding back to HQ. As he clicks his radio, ready to transmit, he sees a large, ominous shadow moving in the darkness. Before he could say a word, a huge 15-foot man-like creature runs out from deep within the cave. The creature skewers one of the soldiers, then lets out a horrifying roar. Looking on in fearful eyes, finger still depressed on his radio, the commander now clearly sees a giant standing menacingly afront. The sounds of men's screams and gunshots quickly fill the air, but time almost paused for the commander. Frozen in place, he took a long look, analysing the beast. The giant had bright red hair and a long red beard with spit and blood oozing from its mouth. It wore bearskin and goat's hide as clothing, and the smell. It reminded him of a decomposing pile of corpses with the persistency of a skunk's spray. Snapped back to his senses, with reality kicking back in, the commander shouts his orders. He orders his men to aim for the head of the creature, and now, with every caliber at their disposal and unified, the troops launch an overwhelming barrage of gunfire. The assault infuriated the giant. It flailed its spear around, trying to dislodge their injured comrade as it charged towards the rest of the men. But it was no match for modern weaponry. After a short, sustained firefight, the giant collapsed to the floor, dead. Immediately following the contact, the commander relayed the situation back to HQ. He frantically tried to get a medevac for his injured comrade, but also realizing the significance of the situation, he began solidifying evidence. Keeping a defensive formation, they tied the body of the giant to a large netting and awaited rescue. Moments go by, and 2 helicopters appeared on the horizon. They had sent one for the now battered and bruised soldiers, and another to retrieve the giant. However, it had become unfortunately apparent that their injured comrade had succumbed to his injuries. This would be the last time the platoon had contact with the giant, and to add insult to injury, their after-action reports of the encounter were rebuked by the chain of command. Ordered to rewrite their reports and furious their friend would see no justice or distinction for his sacrifice, the soldiers reluctantly went back to work. There are 2 main avenues for evidence of this story, both independent of one another. The first comes from a book by Stephen Quayle, which featured on the radio show Coast to Coast. The second comes from an interview with a soldier, described only as Mr. K, who claims to have been in the Special Forces squad that killed the giant. His interview is where most of this story originates from. It is claimed that Mr. K has been interviewed many times and his story has never changed, but these interviews all originate from one source. He is, however, backed up by another interviewee who claimed to be in Afghanistan years later. This man recalls his experience hearing about tales from the encounter, and both interviews can be found here on YouTube. However, as the interviews progress, it becomes apparent that this story ties perfectly in with the interviewer's pre-established agenda of Nephilim wandering the earth. So I advise you to maybe take it with a pinch of salt. When asked by journalists in a Freedom of Information request, the Department of Defense said no such files of the event exist. But with the American government currently declassifying and sharing UFO encounters, why would they feel the need to lie about this? I also find it very hard to believe that a platoon-level patrol would go missing without serious consequences and media attention back at home. It sounds incredibly unlikely and not something I can find any evidence of. But what do you think? Are giants really roaming the earth? Or is it all just a hoax? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content and are interested in hearing more, then please like the video and subscribe to my channel. I have put links in the description of sites I found interesting that develop more on the topic. Please feel free to leave a comment discussing your thoughts, and I hope to see you next time.